One really interesting tool on your list is storytelling. The idea that people understand well-told stories better than elaborate presentations or PowerPoints. And of course your book is a great example of that. The Knight Hennessy fundraising and the 2008 fundraising were good examples to me of that in kind of opposite directions, in that Knight Hennessy was future-oriented. It was saying, if we had these resources, we could do these amazing things by creating a new generation of leaders over and over again, and this would be a great benefit to the world. The fundraising to maintain financial aid, on the other hand, after the meltdown in the endowment in 2008, was really more about recognizing that what we had was important to preserve. Need-blind admission for all students, and making sure that by showing what those students who had had financial aid 30 years ago had gone on to do, that was worth fighting for, and it was worth sacrificing for to make sure that we can do that. Do you have other favorite storytelling things in your leadership career where storytelling made a big difference?
You know, I think stories make something personable. They bring you up close to it so you can see it. I mean, in the case of Knight Hennessy, we didn't have any Knight Hennessy scholars yet. So I couldn't tell you great stories about the scholars we had because we didn't have them yet. Now we have them, so now we have great stories to tell you. So what did I do? I went through the list of Rhodes Scholars and picked out some people I really admired and said, we could build a program like that, maybe even better than that, given we do it in sunny California in this highly entrepreneurial institution. And it could have a similar size impact or larger. So that enabled me to couple it to something that was really very personal and very, you know, in the case of financial aid, we had the benefit of the stories of students who had benefited from it. We also, when we went to our alumni and the trustees for help on financial aid in the aftermath of the financial crisis, we had already cut the budget of the university. Everybody had had a salary freeze. The senior leadership had actually taken a salary decrease. So then I could go to the board and say, we've cut across the board in terms of things. I don't want to cut financial aid at a time when families are going to be struggling more, not less. And in fact, we discovered we underestimated our financial aid need because a lot of families who had two parents working all of a sudden found themselves with only one parent working. So that made it a lot easier to talk about the importance of that commitment and that we had already made other sacrifices to maintain it. And therefore, we needed philanthropic help to really try to close the gap.
Yeah. It was remarkable, the events that were held around the financial aid, to realize not just people who had gone on to fame and fortune, but also our own faculty members who had been students here and had would have been unable to go without that financial aid. Changing topics for a moment. As best I can recall, you had never done any formal training in leadership along the way. The School of Hard Knocks.
School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, which is a pretty effective school.
Especially if it's in a startup company. It's a very time-compressed way of learning. You get to do lots of different roles you've never done before. I mean, I did everything. I did cold sales. I was the technical spokesman for the company. Everybody should do sales once if they want to lead an organization because it's really will give them a deep appreciation of how hard it is.
Well, we're all in sales.
We are in sales.
All the changes is the product job.
Yes, exactly. That's probably true. So, yeah, but I didn't have formal training.
But as you now lead the Knight Hennessy Scholars, and we say that we aspire for them to be a generation of leaders, What are you thinking about as ways to do that leadership training?
So we are thinking about ways in which we can help our scholars develop both skills as well as insights, whether it's developing a sense of empathy by whether it's going over to the hospital and visiting people who are struggling for their lives, or it's getting involved in a service project somewhere in the local community and understand those relationships and how to work with people without having the, well, I'm here to save you complex, which I think often leads to disconnect. Building up skills for public speaking. The other night we had an event with Rob Capello, who does the program What Makes It Great, and it was about listening. And he talked about how, as a conductor, his job is to really help the players, the musicians, collaborate. That they have the music, but if they're not collaborating on that music, if they're not listening to one another, if he's not helping them through that process and cueing little things, it doesn't sound quite as great as it does when everything works right. So it was a really interesting insight. You don't think about music necessarily as something that's really about collaboration and teamwork, but it is. It is.
The authoritarian leader who uses threats and rewards to motivate the followers. Why was about how job satisfaction and self-direction were the best motivators. Do you see your theories as being someplace on that axis, or do you think that's just the wrong axis?
Well, it may be the wrong axis. I mean, I think clearly people who are motivated by their job, but boy, I like the notion that people are motivated by what the organization they're in is doing for the world. I think this is really, certainly in a university, people come to work in the university because the university is doing great work and educating the next generation. That's an inspiring mission. So I think, but that's true in companies as well. I think companies, certainly they're motivated by financial accomplishments, immediate job satisfaction, but they're also motivated by what the company is trying to do and the mission of the company.
And of course that's easier in a university,
right?
Because it attracts exactly people who appreciate that mission.
Exactly.
I want to talk about selecting and developing leadership on a team, and I want to begin with the remarkable 16-year partnership that you had with John Echevendi. What were you looking for in recruiting him as provost? I mean, if I were doing just an objective assessment of experience, you were probably a bit of a stretch as president, right? As you would probably agree,
yeah, sure.
And younger than most peers. And John was had been a department chair.
And associate dean.
But yet you both formed a fabulous partnership. So tell us how that.
So I didn't recognize all the attributes that John had early on, but what I was looking for was somebody whose experience was in contrast to mine, we would have enough that we were compatible. So we both know something about computation and logic, but he obviously had much more credibility in the humanities, and I think that as a philosopher, that was valuable. So that complemented my background, and somebody who I thought the faculty would have confidence in, which I think certainly they did have confidence in John, and he had the support of his colleagues that he had interacted with. What I didn't realize is there were two other attributes that I got. Someone who was fiercely loyal to Stanford. Fiercely loyal, so loyal to Stanford that they would turn down many job offers as president at the top institutions to stay at Stanford. I didn't realize how deep his loyalty ran to Stanford, and how much he enjoyed the job. And I found somebody with the patience of Job, which I'm not the most patient person.
I've never noticed that.
Yes, I'm not always. But John is the most patient person, and I think that provided a unique opportunity for us to do our work together and collaborate in a way. I mean, we basically divided up the space. Not that we didn't communicate about decisions that crossed the boundary, but basically I had felt completely comfortable letting John handle something and not worry about it. And I think if you want to know why I was able to do the job for 16 years, because I had a great provost for 16 years.
Really great.
Yeah.
How important when you're looking at people for a leadership team is their ability, or what you perceive to be their ability, to grow on the job?
Well, you know the story that's in the book, Isaac, of course. I think it's hard to assess, but it's probably absolutely crucial for somebody who's going to be in the job for a long period of time. How can they grow and learn the new skills they need, and learn how to manage it over a long period of time. Right? Leading great organizations, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And if you start running like a sprint, the one thing I can tell you is you're not going to last very long. So learning that skill of being able to grow and learn things, one thing I touch on in the book is learning how to manage stress. I mean, the first time you're catapulted to a new leadership level, it's incredibly stressful. And I used to say, when I was department chair, I had about one sleepless night a quarter. When I became dean, it was one sleepless night a month. When I became president, it was one sleepless night a week. And then I said, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And it's learning how do you deal with complex things. And 90% of those sleepless things were caused by people problems that arose, right? Difficult circumstances that arose. And you're just, either it's a meeting you had today and you can't sleep because you're... So you have to find ways to deal with that and learn skills. One of the things we would do is, Etch or I would compose an email about something. We had a meeting, we were just very angry. We'd compose an email, I'd send it to Etch. He'd write back, you're absolutely right, but do not send that email.
That's a good...
It was a great way.
The writing is fun.